3 minutes. That's how long it took for Lucas Brandt to fire me. No greeting. No smile. Just a curt nod and a termination letter already signed. I had barely sat down before he said it. You're not a team player. Eliza. That was his entire assessment of my 8 years here. It was 10:35 on a Monday morning. And the only thing colder than his tone was the glass of water untouched on his desk. He didn't ask about the compliance systems I'd built after the 2018 collapse. He didn't mention the international audit I'd led, or the flagged risks in Q4 that I'd practically shouted into the void. None of it mattered. Lucas was new, 3 days into the role, freshly installed by a board eager for disruption. They called him a forward thinker. I called him what he was, a man in a rush to carve his name into the walls. No matter who bled for the chisel. He barely looked at me. Your position no longer fits where this company is headed. That's all he said, as if I were a spreadsheet column he'd hidden. Not wrong, just no longer convenient. But his real mistake wasn't firing me. It was assuming I hadn't seen what he did in Brussels. It was assuming I'd walk out quietly, grateful for a severance and silence. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag and placed a red folder on his desk. He didn't touch it. I won't need that, he said, but he would, because inside that folder were documents, names, transfers, inconsistencies that didn't belong. And 3 days earlier, I had received an email that changed everything. No sender, no subject, just 7 words. Don't let him do it again. That folder wasn't my defense. It was my warning shot. And Lucas Brandt had just fired the one person who already knew what was buried beneath the surface. 3 days before that meeting, before Lucas Brandt tried to erase me, I was sipping lukewarm coffee at my desk when something odd happened. It was early, 7:28 a.m. Too early for vendor emails. Too late for routine updates. I was alone on the 3rd floor. West Wing. My little corner of calm. Far from the polished chaos of the executive suites. The chime on my monitor was soft but sharp. A new message. I expected junk. What I got was a ghost. The sender's name made my breath catch. Jennifer Moreno. Jen. She hadn't worked here, or anywhere. Really, for years. And yet, there it was. Her old Kestrel finance email address. Not Gmail, not Outlook, Kestrel. The very company Lucas had once restructured before his swift, unexplained departure. The subject line was blank. The body? Just one sentence. Don't let him do it again. No context, no greeting, no signature. I stared at it, unsure if I'd imagined it. I hit refresh. Still there, but the timestamp was strange. 6:03 a.m. 90 minutes before it even showed up in my inbox. I replied instinctively. Jen? Is this really you? What's going on? The message bounced. User not found. I checked our email logs. Nothing. No record. It was like the email had bypassed every firewall. Every archive. A message sent through a crack in the system. And it wasn't just the message. It was the name. The history. Jen and I had worked together at Kestrel during some of the company's darkest days. She was brilliant, quiet, meticulous, always 3 steps ahead, but after one flagged report spiraled into a firestorm, she vanished. No LinkedIn, no goodbyes, just gone. The last thing she told me? Something's wrong with the numbers. Eliza, it's not creative accounting anymore. It's something else, something hidden. That was 2 years ago. And now, this. I couldn't let it go. I dug through my old flash drives, stuffed in drawers. Long forgotten. One of them still had her name. Training modules _JM. Most folders were blank, but one, Risk Finch, wasn't. I clicked. Dozens of files. Internal reviews. Vendor blacklists. Financial memos. Then I saw it. Client transfer _variance _2jm.pdf. I opened it. The data hit me like cold water. Pages of financial transfers, flagged entries that bore eerie patterns, duplicate amounts routed through different departments, offshore transactions labeled as regional grants. One caught my eye. Linen Group. Region 4. Discretionary funding. Only. We never had discretionary funds at Kestrel. It didn't exist. The final page was a scanned signature. Neat. Deliberate. In black ink. H.M. Cullen, Vice President, Strategic Deployment. Lucas Brandt's old name, before he polished it and dropped the M. I stared at it, my heart pounding. I reached for my phone. Unsure if the number I had for Jen even worked. I dialed anyway. It rang. Once. Twice. Click. Hello? The voice was rough. Older. Like it had been buried underground. Jen? I whispered. A pause. Then a sigh. I was wondering how long it would take. You sent the message? My voice cracked. Another pause. Yes. My hands were shaking now. He's here, I said. Lucas. He's our new CEO. I know, she replied. I've been watching. We moved to encrypted chat almost immediately. I didn't ask how she was ready. She always was. He's doing it again. I typed. Shadow accounts. I found one. Linen R, not in the directory. No records. Of course. She wrote back. He never stopped. He just got better at hiding it. Did you keep the proof? I asked. The typing bubble lingered. You really want to see it? Yes. 15 minutes later, another file dropped into my secure drive. kf_client_4b_variance_June 2019.pdf. I opened it with frozen fingers. Another contract. Vendor style. It looked ordinary, until it didn't. Client contact. TBD. Project. Undefined. Region 4. Same discretionary language. Same fake structure. Different spelling. Linen R, not linen. Just enough to bypass our duplicate detection. At the bottom. Again. H. M. Cullen. It was real. It was happening again. You kept this? I asked. I wasn't supposed to. She typed. They made me sign an exit package banning retention. But I couldn't let it die. I knew someday he'd resurface. And no one would believe me without proof. I stared at my screen. You were right, I typed. I felt something shift inside me then, not anger. Something deeper, cold, heavy, purpose. I've already been fired, I wrote. Jen's reply was instant. Then you have nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I printed everything. The PDFs, the ledgers, the flagged transactions. I hid the originals in a secure folder. Sent copies to legal contacts. And slid the third copy into the red folder I would carry with me into Lucas's office 2 days later. But something still itched in the back of my mind. Something unfinished. So I ran one more search. I pulled up Dominion's internal payment records, used my remaining credentials while I still had them. I searched by amount, date, and project tags. What I found stopped my breath. $240. Every 14 days. 12 payments. All approved within 24 hours. All tied to one inactive account alias. LGR4B827. I dug deeper. No project lead. No client correspondence. No history. The transfers were masked under budget lines like client development and consulting bundles. I followed the code trail through layers of database entries until I hit the final approval. User ID. Lucas Brandt, admin. He had signed every one of them himself. He hadn't even tried to hide it. I printed the log, marked it with a red pen. Then I wrote one phrase on a sticky note and slapped it onto the cover of the folder. Linen R-$8 million ghost. This wasn't a theory. This wasn't a hunch. This was a system. And I had just uncovered its blueprint. The morning I brought the folder into the compliance room, I thought I was ready for whatever would come next. I wasn't. There were 5 people already seated at the long table, 4 familiar faces I had worked with for years. And one stranger. He wore a sharp charcoal suit, didn't smile, and had the kind of stillness that felt calculated. I would later learn his name, Damien Shaw, one of Lucas's hand-picked senior directors from his old firm. They didn't acknowledge me when I entered. No greetings, no small talk. Just the low murmur of conversation and the tapping of fingers on tablets. I cleared my throat. Silence. I have something to bring forward, I said, voice steady. There's a disbursement pattern I've reviewed that violates internal controls. A non-existent client is receiving recurring transfers totaling over $8 million. No one looked up except Brian Carson, head of strategic operations. He folded his arms across his chest like I'd just interrupted a staff lunch. Eliza, he said, carefully neutral, as of this week, Your role is no longer within the compliance structure. Any concerns should go through the transition office. This isn't a procedural question. I replied. It's a fraud risk. The project code doesn't correspond to any documented client. There are no contracts, no scopes of work, no correspondence. The funds are disappearing. You're implying fraud. I'm presenting evidence. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the tabletop. Your access is being closed by end of day. This isn't your responsibility anymore. No one defended me, not even Maya, someone I'd mentored since her internship. She avoided my eyes. I stood there, folder still in hand, invisible in a room I once led. I understand, I said, and I left. But something in me cracked as I stepped into the hallway. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even fear. It was certainty. They didn't want the truth. They wanted silence. As I passed the executive conference room, I paused. Through the glass, I saw Lucas, standing at the head of the table, laughing with two other executives. His laptop was open. A stack of folders lay beside it. One was labeled, Eliza Grant, personnel file. He tapped his finger on it as he spoke. Like it was a prop. Like I was a prop. I walked back to my office in a fog. No one looked up. No one asked if I was okay. But then, another surprise landed. An email. No subject. No name. Just an audio file labeled, play_me.wave. I hesitated, then clicked. The voice was unmistakable. Lucas. She's been here forever. Knows where everything's buried. But she's not leadership. She's old furniture. You don't argue with it. You just replace it. Laughter followed. Not just his. At least two others. Male. Confident. I paused the recording. Old furniture. That was how he saw me. Something outdated. In the way. I sat very still. Not angry. Not yet. But something colder. I checked the file's metadata. Scrubbed. No trace. Someone had sent this anonymously. Someone inside. Not to warn me. To awaken me. That night, I stared at the photo on my desk. Ava. Age 10. Holding a sand dollar from the last real vacation we'd taken. Her smile wide. Her cheeks sunburned. Her hair tangled from wind. It was supposed to be different now. I was supposed to be different. I thought hard work would shield us. That if I followed the rules, I'd be safe. I was wrong. So I sent the audio file. One to legal. One to a journalist. One to our largest client's compliance director. No subject. No explanation. It didn't need one. The next morning, I walked into Lucas's office for my final meeting. The red folder under my arm wasn't for him anymore. It was for everyone else. He didn't look at me. Just motioned to the chair. Eliza, he said, after careful review of our evolving needs. I tuned him out. I was staring at his screen. Open on his laptop. Bold and unmistakable. Client funds transfer schedule. The very file I had flagged. The one only legal and finance should have access to. He didn't even hide it. I realized something important in that moment. He wasn't just arrogant. He was sloppy. And the worst kind of fraud is the one that starts believing its own immunity. I stood without a word. Didn't give him the satisfaction of a plea. I walked out. That afternoon, the article hit. Not a major outlet. A niche blog read by forensic accountants. Whistleblowers. Investigative analysts. The title. Unnamed insider flags irregular transfers in global equity firm. The story was short but surgical. 4 paragraphs. Citing anonymous sources. Describing a pattern of disguised disbursements. Non-existent clients. And internal documents leaked through encrypted channels. There were no names. But the implication was deafening. And just like that, the silence cracked. By lunch, 3 major clients had called to initiate audits. By 3 p.m., legal was in full panic. I got the text from a former colleague. They're pulling apart 6 months of approvals. PR is scrambling. Lucas hasn't been seen since noon. At 4:10 p.m., another message came in. No greeting. Just one sentence. He should have never underestimated you. I didn't recognize the number. Didn't need to. It was happening. The ripple I started had become a wave. And Lucas? Lucas had no idea the tide was already pulling him under. The first real shift didn't come with the article or the client calls. It came the moment I realized I had stopped checking over my shoulder. It was the next morning. I was pouring coffee in my kitchen, Still in my robe. Hair a mess. The red folder now living in the locked drawer beside my desk at home. My phone buzzed on the counter. A headline stared back at me. Former Kestrel exec under scrutiny again. Transfer patterns echo past misconduct. It was Lucas. They had finally named him. It wasn't front-page news. Not yet, but it didn't need to be. The article was from a respected financial ethics watchdog. Quiet, precise, lethal in its reach. I scrolled through slowly. They referenced offshore grants, mismatched vendor trails, and questionable approvals. Every piece matched what I had discovered. Except this time, I wasn't reading it with fear. I was reading it with clarity. The silence I'd felt in the office, the way people averted their eyes, shifted in their seats when I entered, hadn't just been indifference. It had been complicity. Passive, maybe, but complicity all the same. And now that silence was cracking. One leak had started a flood. By 10:15 a.m., the internal Slack channels were on fire. People danced around the topic in vague terms. Did you see the blog? That looks familiar. Someone posted a link to the article in the compliance group. It was deleted 5 minutes later. Too late. At 10:48, an email landed in my inbox. No subject, just one line. I believe you. I've seen it too. It was signed only with an initial, L. It wasn't much. No details. No confession. Just a whisper. But sometimes a whisper is louder than a scream, when you've been alone long enough. I typed back. Can you share what you've seen? No reply. But the change had already happened. I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like someone they were watching. Listening to. Maybe even quietly following. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one begging to be heard. I was steering the conversation. That afternoon, I received an unexpected message from Nora, a senior consultant at Orion Strategies, one of our most aggressive competitors. We'd met once, years ago, at a fintech conference. She was sharp, fearless, and didn't waste words. Her email had no greeting. Just a photo, a desk, a man in a navy suit, and in the center, the red folder. My red folder. The annotations, the flagged transactions, the sticky note that read, Linen R-$8 million ghost. It was sitting open on the desk of Orion's CEO. Lucas's old rival, the same man he publicly humiliated in a bid war 3 years earlier. I stared at the image. Mouth dry. This wasn't internal anymore. It wasn't just about protecting my name or proving a point. Now, it was competitive. Now, someone else had picked up the fire and poured gasoline on it. By evening, I had received 2 more messages. One from a junior analyst at our largest client firm. Our legal team is requesting a full audit of all transfers marked Linen R, effective immediately. And one from our second largest account. Please be advised. All disbursements to discretionary projects are being frozen pending external review. Just like that, the foundation cracked beneath Lucas's feet. He didn't just face internal embarrassment. He faced market trust collapse. And I didn't lift a finger. Because the work was already done. All I had done was light the fuse. That night, as I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and Ava asleep upstairs, I remembered a line from my first week on the job, something an old compliance officer told me. Your job isn't to make friends. It's to be the last one standing when the music stops. Back then, I'd taken it as a warning. Now I understood it was a map. I had been the last one standing. But I wouldn't be standing alone for much longer. The next morning, at 7:20 a.m., a message popped up with a subject line I hadn't expected. Private meeting 11 a.m., West Boardroom, discretion advised. It was from Graham Thorne, a senior board member and former CFO. A man I had seen exactly twice in 8 years. He was meticulous, measured, feared, and now, apparently, interested. I didn't reply. I just showed up. At 10:58, I stood outside the West Boardroom. Red folder in hand. I wasn't nervous. I was calm. My heart wasn't racing. My mind wasn't spinning. I knew who I was walking in as. Not a victim. Not a threat. A variable they hadn't accounted for. Graham was already seated at the head of the table. Glasses low on his nose. Tablet in front of him. Eliza, he said, not looking up. Please sit. I sat. He studied me for a long moment. You've caused turbulence. I didn't cause the storm. I said, I just stopped pretending it wasn't coming. He tapped once on his tablet, then pushed it aside. The board doesn't care about rumors. It cares about risk. Then you already know what I've brought, I said, and slid the folder forward. He didn't touch it, just stared at it. Then finally, we'll need time. You don't have it, I said. Clients are walking. Competitors are circling. And Lucas is already toxic. Graham leaned back, measured, cold, but not dismissive. Why are you still involved? He asked. You've already been cut loose. I met his gaze. Because I've spent 8 years cleaning up everyone else's messes. And I'm not letting someone bury me under theirs. His face didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Not pity, respect. And that was the moment I realized something. They didn't just want to silence me anymore. They wanted me back. Not for redemption. For survival. I didn't expect the board to cave that fast. 2 days after the meeting with Graham Thorne, I received an email marked, confidential, immediate consideration. It was dressed up in all the polite language corporate damage control teams love to use, trusted insight. Critical timing. Advisory potential. Beneath all the polish. The message was simple. They wanted me back. Not in my old role. That was gone. Erased like I'd never existed. No, this was different. They wanted me as an advisor. An external figure who could guide internal investigations. Help stabilize client relationships. And more importantly, keep my mouth shut long enough for them to clean up the mess. They didn't say it outright. They didn't have to. They were desperate. And that desperation was my leverage. I didn't reply immediately. I let the message sit in my inbox for 11 minutes. Just long enough for them to wonder if I would say no. Then I responded. Schedule a call. I have conditions. The virtual meeting was set for the following afternoon. 4 squares lit up on my screen. Graham. 2 other board members. And a corporate legal liaison. All of them wore neutral expressions. All of them trying hard to hide what this moment really was. A reversal. Eliza, Graham said, tone smooth. First, let me express our appreciation for the discretion you've shown these past few days. I wasn't silent. I said calmly. I was precise. A brief pause. The legal representative spoke next. We believe your unique perspective would be valuable as we assess how best to rebuild stakeholder trust. Clients, partners, staff, and the press, I added. No one corrected me. They were offering me a chance to sit at the table again. But I wasn't interested in returning to a table I'd been pushed off of. I'll consider assisting, I said, but on 3 conditions. 4 pairs of eyes sharpened. 1, I said, you hire an independent audit firm, one that reports directly to the board. No input from interim leadership. No internal oversight. Graham nodded. Understood. 2, you make the audit results public. Full disclosure. No redactions. No buried addendums. No vague legal summaries. The legal representative shifted in her seat. That would expose the company to liability. Transparency always carries risk, I replied. So does fraud. Silence. 3rd, I continued. I won't be accepting the advisory position. They blinked. Not in disbelief. More in delayed understanding. I'm forming my own organization. I said. An independent ethics oversight group. One that doesn't answer to shareholders or quarterly goals. You'd be a competitor, one of the board members said flatly. No, I said, I'd be a safeguard, one this industry sorely needs. They didn't argue. They couldn't. They had no moral high ground to stand on. Not anymore. I ended the call on my terms. Not theirs. The next morning, I filed the paperwork to establish the Integrity Advisory Group, a boutique ethics firm with a narrow mission and a wide scope. Expose. Advise. Prevent. No fluff. No cover-ups. Just truth. Within 48 hours, I had 5 team members, former auditors, compliance officers, a cybersecurity expert, and yes, Jen Moreno. She didn't hesitate when I called. I've been waiting for something like this. She said, count me in. We didn't have an office yet. Just laptops, encrypted drives, and conviction. But the moment we posted our private launch notice, my inbox exploded. 9 inquiries in the first hour. 3 clients by the end of the day. And 1 message I didn't expect. From Orion Strategies. A simple subject line. We'd like to talk. That same afternoon, Graham called again. I hope you'll remain available to assist. He said carefully, we're preparing a full press statement. And client fallout has been measurable. I'll review the draft when you're ready. I said, and for the record, I don't work for you. I work with whoever wants this industry to stop eating its own. He exhaled slowly. You've changed. No, I replied. You just finally saw me clearly. 3 days later, the story hit the mainstream press. Top executive banned from leadership following ethics investigation. Lucas Brandt's name was everywhere. CNN, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal. His fall was swift, and not even the board tried to stop it this time. They had seen the audits. They had heard the recordings. They had watched the red folder move from desk to desk like a lit match in a dry forest. The SEC opened an inquiry. A class action suit was filed. 3 board members resigned. And Lucas? Lucas disappeared. His last official act had been terminating my position. His last legacy? Proving why I was needed. I never heard from him directly. No apology. No denial. Just silence. The same silence he once expected me to stay trapped in. Now, it was his to live in. By the end of the week, we secured office space. Nothing fancy. A 3rd floor walk-up above a bookstore. Natural light. Old wood floors. Quiet. It was perfect. I sat in my new chair, coffee in hand, staring out the window as emails continued to roll in. Thank yous, referrals, even a few confessions, from people still trapped in places like the one I'd left. One stood out. No name. Just a sentence. Because of you, I'm finally ready to speak. It hit me then. The opportunity I'd found wasn't a new job. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was freedom. The chance to rebuild the rules instead of survive them. And this time, I wasn't asking permission. I used to think strength meant endurance. Staying late, saying yes, fixing other people's mistakes, burying my discomfort under politeness, wearing blazers like armor, nodding through meetings where I wasn't heard, smiling while being talked over, staying invisible so no one would call me difficult. But real strength? It's knowing when enough is enough. That realization didn't come with a bang. It arrived quietly. In the middle of my new office. On a Tuesday morning, when I caught my reflection in the glass door. I looked the same, button-down shirt, hair in a twist, pen behind my ear, but something in my eyes had shifted. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked ready. Our tiny team at the Integrity Advisory Group had grown faster than I imagined. Word spread quickly, first through whispers in backrooms, then in quiet emails sent from personal accounts. People who had seen too much. People who had said too little for too long. People who were tired of being punished for doing the right thing. We didn't offer PR cover. We didn't offer rebranding services. We offered truth, the kind that could be proven, recorded, dissected, and defended. Our third client was a mid-size investment firm out of Chicago. They had terminated a compliance officer without cause, 3 weeks after she flagged a questionable transfer. Sound familiar? I took the call myself. Her name was Tasha, and when I asked her what happened, she said, they told me I was too rigid, that I wasn't flexible enough for where the company was going. I didn't have to ask what that meant. They wanted someone to bend. She didn't, so they broke her instead. We'll help, I said, and I meant it, not just with words, with strategy, with evidence, with consequences. A week later, we uncovered 3 months' worth of falsified approvals. Tasha's instincts had been dead on. She wasn't rigid, she was precise. That was the moment I saw the version of myself I used to be. And I knew exactly what she needed most. Belief. My daughter Ava had noticed the change too. It was subtle at first. I was home for dinner. I answered texts. I wasn't always staring at a laptop, whispering, just 5 more minutes. But the real shift came one night when I found her in the kitchen, studying the newspaper I'd left on the counter. She pointed at the headline, Whistleblower Uncovers $8 Million Scheme. That was you, right? I froze. What makes you think that? She smiled, because the whistleblower sounded like a mom. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in months. Then she said something I'll never forget. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not afraid. I didn't cry. I just stood there, the air thick between us, and nodded. Then I'll make sure the world is better for you when you get there. In the weeks that followed, we turned down 3 companies. They didn't want oversight. They wanted protection. They wanted to say they were being ethical without being ethical. One firm offered us $150 for a 6-week advisory retainer, with 0 expectations of reporting. I told them they were confusing us with a law firm. We weren't in the business of making bad behavior look better. We were in the business of preventing it. At night, I would replay conversations I'd once had with Lucas. The way he used to sit in meetings, checking his phone mid-sentence. How he spoke in statements, not questions. How every problem was optics. Every solution, strategy, never substance. He thought leadership meant winning. He never understood that leadership is stewardship. It's being accountable, not being untouchable. That was his flaw. And mine, for too long, was believing I needed to stay in proximity to men like him to have power. Now I understood. Real power is portable. And I had carried mine with me all along. The call came from a media outlet one afternoon. They wanted me on record. Not just as an anonymous source. As the source. The one who had exposed the $8 million ghost. I declined. Not because I was afraid. But because it wasn't about me anymore. The story wasn't mine to cling to. It belonged to the people who needed it next. The ones still trapped. The ones still silenced. I gave them a name for background only. Then I closed the laptop and looked out the window. There were 2 kids riding their bikes down the street, laughing. Racing. Free. For the first time in a long time. I felt free, too. Not from something, but towards something. Our firm received a handwritten letter that week. No return address. Just my name. Inside, on plain stationery, were these words. I watched everything you did. I was too scared to act. But now I'm not. Thank you for reminding me we're allowed to fight back. There was no signature. It didn't need one. I kept the letter tucked in my desk drawer. Not as proof. As a promise. Some nights, I still think about the red folder. It's archived now, digitally stored. Sealed in multiple locations. But I'll never forget how it felt in my hands. Not heavy. Not fragile. Necessary. That folder wasn't just a symbol of what I risked. It was a symbol of what I reclaimed. Voice. Agency. Truth. All the things I thought I had to surrender to survive. Turns out, survival wasn't the goal. Integrity was. It didn't happen all at once. There was no victory parade. No dramatic press conference. No sudden declaration that justice had been served. That's not how it works in the real world. Change doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with resistance. With quiet determination. And with people who refuse to stay small when the world tries to shrink them. It came one email at a time. One audit request. One resignation. One frightened employee finally whispering, "I think something's wrong here," and realizing someone was finally listening. And it came with silence. Not the oppressive kind that once followed me through Dominion's sterile halls, but a new kind. A stillness that comes after a storm. When you know the ground is finally settling into something solid again. The news of Lucas Brandt's permanent corporate leadership ban hit the mainstream less than a month after the story broke. His image, once splashed across glossy investor brochures, was now a footnote in articles about executive misconduct and corporate ethics reform. He disappeared almost completely. No more panels. No LinkedIn updates. No one lining up to defend his bold leadership anymore. The man who once dismissed me as old furniture, as something to be replaced without hesitation, had become the very thing the industry wanted to forget. And I didn't need my name in the headline to feel the weight of that victory. Because I didn't win for recognition. I won because I still had a voice, and I used it. The Integrity Advisory Group wasn't just a company anymore. It was becoming a movement. We'd started with 6 people. Now we were nearing 20. Each person had their own story, some loud, some silent, all the same shape at the core. They had been pushed out for doing the right thing. And now they were fighting back with me. One of our new clients was a major hospital system. Their internal auditor, an older man named Raymond, had flagged inconsistencies in pharmaceutical contracts. His concerns had been ignored, buried, and eventually reframed as performance issues. He came to us quiet, almost apologetic. I don't want revenge, he said. I just want it to stop. I smiled. That's what we're here for. In the evenings, after the calls and the reports and the decisions, I'd sit by the window of our office with a cup of tea and look out over the city, not from a towering skyscraper, but from our modest third floor, where the view wasn't grand, but it was real. Below us were lives in motion. People walking dogs, kids on scooters, a street vendor who always played the same jazz mix around 5 p.m. It grounded me, reminded me of why we fight for integrity, not for policies or procedures, but for the people those policies are meant to protect. I hadn't seen Ava smile like that in a long time. One night, we sat on the living room floor eating takeout, and she told me her friend's mom had heard about me. Isn't your mom the one who exposed that CEO guy? Her friend had asked. Ava looked at me and said, I told her you didn't just expose him. You beat the whole system. I blinked, caught off guard. I didn't beat the system. Honey, I just didn't let it beat me. She shrugged. Same thing. We both laughed. But later, when she was upstairs and the house was quiet, I thought about what she'd said. Maybe that is the same thing. One morning, I received a package at the office. No return label. Inside was a red folder. My red folder. The original one. I thought it had been discarded, destroyed, forgotten. But here it was. Worn at the edges. Pages still clipped inside. The same annotations. The same sticky note in my handwriting. Linen R-$8 million ghost. There was a note tucked inside. You lit the match. Thought you'd want to keep the spark. N. I smiled. Nora. Of course. The red folder went up on a shelf in my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Truth has weight. Truth leaves a trail. And sometimes, all it takes is one woman refusing to look away. I don't think I'll ever go back to the version of myself I used to be. The one who thought loyalty meant staying silent. The one who cancelled vacations and missed birthdays to chase the illusion of job security. That woman was strong. But this one? This one is free. And freedom isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not even always visible. Sometimes freedom looks like walking into a room you were once pushed out of and knowing you'll never need their approval again. Sometimes it's letting go of the need to be right, and embracing the power of being unignorable. My last call of the day was with a young analyst from a private equity firm. Her voice was shaky. She kept apologizing for taking up my time. I told her to stop apologizing. You're not the interruption, I said. You're the point. She paused. I want to report something, she said, but I'm afraid they'll say I misunderstood. That I'm too young to know what I'm seeing. I leaned forward. Then let's make sure you're not alone. That's the work now. Not just catching fraud or cleaning up after corruption, but helping people find their courage. Helping them remember that their voice matters. Because one voice can start a ripple. One red folder can expose an empire. And one quiet woman in the back of the room? She can burn the whole thing down, and build something better in its place. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.